Hello, my name is Matthew Durantes, and today I'll be covering all the required documents needed for a commercial check ride. And funny enough, on the first screen, the DPE on the right hand is actually going to be my DPE. So let's see what a commercial check ride basically is. Now, what the check ride is, it's pretty much the same thing as a private check ride. You're going to do your maneuvers, you're going to do an oral part, and the only thing that's going to be really different is a few FARs as well as a few new maneuvers that you've learned. Now, during this time of your commercial license, you will have learned a few new maneuvers as well, such as your chandelles, lazy 8/8 on pylons, and others like that. But in each of the check rides, there are certain documents needed that must be shown to the DPE so that way you can conduct the proper check ride. Now, what are those documents? To start off, let's look at the aircraft's documents. Obviously, the aircraft is going to need an airworthiness certificate, a registration certificate, all of which should be pretty visible, even if you have to go looking for it sometimes. You're going to need a pilot operating handbook, the POH, any weight and balance data that you should have done before getting into the plane, as well as the aircraft logbook maintenance book. You'll most likely bring that one into the oral section so the DP can ask you what it looks like, where you know what it is, those sort of things. But basically, if you don't know what that is, think of it as the logbook for your aircraft. Any work that's done on the aircraft will be placed in the written down in the aircraft logbook and certified that this work has been done. Now, what is your own equipment that you need for this check ride? Well, you're going to need current aeronautical charts. These charts will be most likely your sectional. But I have seen that DPs these days are more willing to use Garmin Pilot and 4Flight with the movable map to supplement that. But it's still a great plan to bring a paper version with you. Now, the E6B and plotter is going to be very helpful when the DPE will eventually divert you on your so-called cross-country flight plan. And oh, would you look at that? Spock here is showing us how to use one. Now, speaking of, the next thing you're going to need flight plan forms. So, just a form that you can do your flight planning on. Now, this can also be supplemented for Garmin Pilot 4Flight, but it still helps to physically write it out. Just depends on the person, really. Next thing that you're going to need is your logbook, your fancy little logbook here. Hopefully, during your training, you will have logged all the hours that you've needed, and hopefully you've calculated all the hours that you've had so far in your commercial certificate or your commercial license so far in commercial training. If not, then that's going to be a big deal. Next thing on the list so far is the FAR aim. Basically, it needs to be a current FAR aim, and you only really need it for the oral session, which, if you don't know what something is, if you don't know a FAR, which, let's be honest, not everyone knows everything, so we're going to need to go look it up somewhere, and that's great to have the FAR aim right there. Now, if you do it with your phone, you can, but be sure to go to certain government websites such as ECFR. Last thing on the list is an AFD, Airport Facility Directory, and that's also can be used in your Garmin Pilot and your 4Flight. But it's also nice to know how to use a paper version as well. Now, onto our own records. I might have used one of the same things as I did on the previous slide, but first thing you're going to need is your photo ID. That is a driver's license, a current passport. The next thing you're going to need is your current pilot certificate. That could be your private pilot certificate or a private with an instrument ratings, things like that. Next is your medical certificate. Doesn't matter which one, class 1, 2, and 3, they'll all accept those. And next thing, you should have done this really far away from this check ride, but your knowledge test or your written test. And if you haven't gotten it before the check ride, you need to get it done. Now, one thing I mentioned again was your logbook. Just make sure that you have all those hours and that you're not going into it without the proper amount. Next thing is, this is your flight school graduation certificate. This is primarily for Part 141 students. So basically what it is, it's just a piece of paper from the chief flight instructor saying, I certify that this person has met all the requirements to take this check ride. The last thing is probably the least favorite of all of us, and that's the money needed to pay for the DPE. So, besides all of those documents, that's all we're going to need really for the check ride. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.